Last week was our first playoff game, and my plaque psoriasis was so itchy under all my gear. Sometimes just thinking about scratching could take me out of the moment. And then my doctor told me I could get clearer skin with a pill called Otezla.
Otezla apremilast is a prescription medicine used to treat adult patients with plaque psoriasis for whom phototherapy or systemic therapy is appropriate. Otezla can help you get clearer skin after just 4 months.
Okay, ready for the next game. Talking to my doctor about a pill was a total game changer.
Don't use Otezla if you're allergic to it. Get medical help right away if you have trouble breathing or swallowing, swelling of the face, lips, tongue, throat, or arms. Severe diarrhea, nausea or vomiting, depression, suicidal thoughts, or weight loss can happen. Tell your doctor if any of these occur and if you have a history of depression or suicidal thoughts. Live in the moment. Ask your doctor about Otezla. Call 1-844-4-OTEZLA or visit Otezla.com for prescribing info about cost, and more.
It's The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
This is Pick Up the Pieces, Average White Band by, this is a birthday bumper music selection from Corey Windlespect. Corey has been on this program before. He is the man that saved the Holland Tunnel from improper Christmas decorations. He's a great American, and he has become a good friend, and he and his longtime companion, Amy, have both been on this show. She's in the dog food business. But happy birthday, Corey Windlespect. Hopefully all of your wishes come true today and always. I have always enjoyed my conversations with Elliot Resnick. Elliot Resnick is the former chief editor of the Jewish Press. He's the author and editor of several books, including Movers and Shakers, Volume 3. He's the host of the Elliot Resnick Show podcast. And the last time he was on this program, he was explaining the guilty plea that he had taken regarding his role on January 6th. And now he's one of the people that have been pardoned by the president. Elliot, thanks so much for joining me on the radio.
Thank you so very much for having me. I was released almost exactly 48 hours ago.
Wow. Okay. So I want to talk about your time in prison primarily. But for people that have not heard our previous conversations, what exactly was your prison sentence? Where were you serving in prison? And what did you exactly do to get a prison sentence?
So I got a 4-month prison sentence. I was lucky because I was arrested much later in the process. People who were arrested much earlier got, I think, harsher sentences. I was arrested in March of 23, and I was sentenced in September of 24. I was given 4 months of prison, 4 months home detention, 2 years probation, and a $10,000 fine. I was originally charged with assault and civil disorder, and those charges came about because I was part of the crowd on the, I believe, eastern side that broke into the Capitol. And there was a policeman behind me pepper spraying some people in front of me, and I didn't want him to pepper spray them, so I grabbed his wrist for around 2 seconds, and then afterwards, subsequently, like I said, I went into the building and I tried to help some other people get into the building, and so for that, I was charged with those 2 felonies and several misdemeanors, and I pled guilty ultimately to civil disorder, and I was sentenced, and I went in on election day. Oh. I voted in the morning, and I went to prison that afternoon, and I saw the election returns on the TV that night. So that was interesting. And I was in Danbury, Connecticut.
Danbury, Connecticut. Oh, well, I hope you were listening to the show up there.
So I had made a promise to you that I was going to listen, and I said, okay, maybe I was joking. They're like, no, that wasn't a joke. I made a promise on air. I cannot not fulfill that promise. And so then, even though I went to bed every night around 11:30, which is a problem because your show starts at 1, but I said, okay, I made a promise. I bought a radio from the commissary, and I made sure to stay up one night, and I listened to you for 45 minutes because I said there's no way in the world that I'm not.
All right, I'll take it, Elliot. Thank you. I'll take it. Now, what was just tell? There's been a lot of criticism of President Trump, including from some Republicans, for pardoning everybody, not just people that were in the wrong place at the wrong time or went into the Capitol and then walked around and left, but it pardoned also the violent January 6th protesters. Do you think that's a fair criticism?
I don't think it's fair, only because I think everyone needs to be treated equally. So there's one system of justice for everybody. So if you have a summer of riots during which people, burned, looted, and murdered, that's arguably what BLM really stands for. I'm being sort of facetious, but yeah, that is what the violence wing, the most radicals did of that party. They did burn, loot, and murder. $1 to $2 billion worth of damage. 20 people were killed. The most vile anti-American graffiti spray painted on all sorts of buildings. Statues of American heroes torn down in barbaric fashion. We saw that all on TV. The videos were all over the internet. There was one night they tried to storm into the White House. I think they injured 150, I believe, law enforcement officials in that attempt. Trump had to be taken down to a bunker, and nothing happened to most of those people. Police cars were set on fire. So 90% of those people got away with all of that, even though it's all on video. So you can't let them get away with everything that they did, and then all of a sudden say now, if for somebody who might have pushed a police officer or even punched, now I don't condone punching a police officer, but we have to have one system of justice. So if the other side is going to get away with murder, you can't treat one side with a velvet glove and the other side with a sledgehammer. That's just not fair.
Were you expecting a pardon on the president's first day in office, and how did you feel when it finally came down?
So I wasn't sure, because the rumors were he was going to pardon 1,000 people, and now I think 1,500 people have been arrested. So and the people said, well, only the nonviolent people are going to be pardoned. I wasn't sure if my crime technically was violent or not violent. I mean, I did hold his wrist for 2 seconds, the police officer's hand. So I wasn't sure. I was hoping, but look, thank God I had a short sentence either way. But then all of a sudden people told me, no, he pardoned everyone. I said, everyone? Yeah, they said everyone except 14 people whose sentences were commuted instead of pardoned. So I was I always try to be kind of like, don't celebrate till it happens. So I was like, we'll see. But then it happened, and I was happy because, hey, again, my sentence was short, but still, I didn't want to pay $10,000 to the government or spend 4 months in home detention. So I was pleased, and it's funny. People in my units were more happy for me than even I was. They were so happy for me.
Well, I want to ask you about prison life in just a moment. Does being pardoned change how you see your role on January 6th? Do you feel that the pardon somehow vindicates your actions, for instance?
That is an interesting question. I never have really had any moral qualms with what I did that day. I think it's nice that Trump finally sort of recognized that, perhaps, because I think I would say the first few hours of the events of January 6th, Trump was reacting, I think, more or less properly. I think then people around him scared him and told him that you're going to be prosecuted for treason if you don't, completely disassociate yourself from those people. And Trump, if you remember, said that night or the next night that what we did was a heinous crime. What I'll say is that Trump built up so much good credit among his supporters that we all forgot that he actually called us, that he said that we had committed a heinous crime. He completely threw us under the bus. He did not give money to people. Kamala Harris gave money to an organization to bail out the protesters and the rioters during that summer. Trump did not give money to the poor January 6th protesters. I mean, I didn't need it. Some other people did need it. So he was not very helpful. But again, I guess he did so much good for us. And I believe that. He has done so much good that people were willing to overlook it. And he has come around, I guess. And he's now, I think, finally doing what he should have done to begin with, which is stand up for us and not run. And originally he sort of tried to disassociate himself from us.
This podcast is supported by Progressive, a leader in RV insurance. RVs are for sharing adventures with family, friends, and even your pets. So if you bring your cats and dogs along for the ride, you'll want Progressive RV Insurance. They protect your cats and dogs like family by offering up to $1,000 in optional coverage for vet bills in case of an RV accident, making it a great companion for the responsible pet owner who loves to travel. See Progressive's other benefits and more when you quote RV Insurance at Progressive.com today. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Pet injury is an additional coverage and subject to policy terms.
What were some of the most, I realize you were in prison for a short amount of time, but, prison life is prison life. What were some of the most surprising or challenging aspects of prison life that you experienced? Because we have a lot of people listening in prison right now, including until recently a lot of January 6th people. I imagine they're all out now, but a lot of other folks not so lucky. They're still there.
Yeah, so look, I was very lucky to be in a low security prison. I spoke to some prisoners who were in other prisons before they got to Danbury. Some of them had been to a place called MDC Brooklyn. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
I've been there, not as an inmate, but visiting inmates. Yeah.
Okay, so apparently people call it a hell on earth. Apparently it's absolutely horrific.
Not a great place. Not a great place.
There's gang violence, there's stabbings. I know someone who was there during COVID. He didn't see daylight for a year. He didn't see the sky. He didn't see a tree. He didn't see grass. He didn't see birds. Even the craziest liberal on the outside, they at least have windows in their apartment or something. They could see the outside. He didn't see the outside for a year. So, I told someone there that, thankfully I was in Danbury. It sounds like that 2.5 months in Danbury is better than 1 week in MDC. He said 2.5 months. He said, I would rather spend a year in Danbury than spend one week in MDC. So I was lucky to be in a place like Danbury, and especially if you like sports like I do. I haven't played sports since I was in high school, really. And here every day I'm playing sports for an hour or two: basketball, pickleball, soccer, ping pong.
Sounds great. Sounds like an adult summer camp.
Yeah, exactly. In many ways it is. I read 50 books. It is like camp in many ways, without all the fun trips. But
sounds great. I want to go out and commit a nonviolent crime right now.
No, God forbid. You're like a child again. Everything's you're given your meals, everything's planned for you. There's lights out, there's lights up. Whatever. It's like dormitory toy style. Yeah.
Did your time in prison change your perspective on the criminal justice system or on rehabilitation or anything like that?
Kind of. I'll say one thing, and this is a little bit of a sensitive topic, but half the prisoners in Danbury are what we call SOs, which stands for sex offenders. Now, before I got to prison, I thought a sex offender was somebody who lures a 6-year-old child in the basement and then rapes him. Those type of people, as far as I'm concerned, should get the death penalty. But majority of SOs in prison are not of that sort. The majority of these people basically downloaded a photo or a video. And some of these people, or many of these people, didn't even download photos of 6-year-olds. They downloaded photos of 16-year-olds. There was someone in prison I met. He was dating a girl. He was 19. She was 16. She liked him, so she sent him a photo in which she wasn't fully dressed. Her father didn't approve. He informed the police. The boy was arrested.
Wow.
They're married now.
Wow.
The victim was his wife. And he's in prison for several years. And there are a lot of people like that who, you meet people in prison first, and you're playing sports with them. They seem like really nice, normal people. And then you ask them, what happened? Why are you here? And, you find out there's one guy who was in the catering industry for 30 years. And then, he shared some photos. Someone shared, a 15-year-old. He thought was a 20-year-old, shared some photos with him. And then the undercover FBI agent asked him for the photos. So for sharing 5 photos with an FBI agent, he's now in prison for 5 years. And when he gets out of prison, it's going to be very hard for him to get a normal job because big and middle-sized companies do background checks, and who wants to hire a sex offender? And so these people's lives are ruined. And it's you don't have to do it. These are first-time criminals. They've gotten to be 40 years old, some of these people. They never committed a crime before. Send them to prison for a few months. You don't need to send them to prison for 5 years. I was just in prison for 2.5 months. I'm telling you, that's enough time to know you're never going to want to do it again. But, and I find it strange because we don't live exactly in a Puritan society. You could commit adultery 100 times, break up 100 families in the process, cause massive suffering to hundreds of children in the process because we know the children suffer when there's divorce, and you will never spend a day in jail, even though adultery is still illegal in 15 states of the Union. It was still illegal in New York until November, so until 2 months ago. So we're not exactly a Puritan society. So why are we locking up people for 5 years who just downloaded a video in the privacy of their own home? I'm not condoning it at all.
Sure, of course. I agree with everything you said. Absolutely.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I'll say maybe one quick thing else
Sure.
about this. It's 2 quick things. Number one, these people are prosecuted under laws that were made 40 years ago. And, 40 years ago to commit these crimes, you have to be a real sicko. To commit these crimes today, unfortunately, I'm not really familiar with the dark web, but I would imagine it doesn't take more than 30 or 60 seconds from the moment of desire to the moment of download. So it's not really fair to prosecute people under these old laws, which were made for people who were really part of kind of like a child pornography ring to commit these crimes in the olden days. You have to, it's a whole different ballgame. And the last thing, these people are prosecuted under the Interstate Commerce Clause. It's not interstate commerce. When you download a photo, it's not interstate commerce. Interstate commerce is, tariffs. The Constitution gave Congress authority because they wanted to have a functioning national economy. And if you have to pay 15 tariffs when you're transporting goods from New York to California, you can't have a functioning national economy. But nowadays, Congress does 1.5 million things under the authority, quote unquote, of the Commerce Clause, and they claim that, well, a computer is made of several different parts, and the parts come from different
right. No,
parts of the union.
It's a total perversion of what it was intended. It's ridiculous.
Exactly. And also, they'll claim that when you share a photo, that photo was bounced off a server in a different state, so therefore it's interstate commerce. I mean, there are state laws against these things. The federal government does not have to be involved.
Yeah, you're speaking my language, and a lot of people listening to you in federal prison right now, all over the country, slamming their fist on their prison cell, agreeing with you. You've said that there were injustices that you observed in prison. Can you share one or two specific examples that stood out to you, or does that include the inappropriate penalties for so-called sex offenders?
Yeah, I would say the majority of the stories that I heard that was a little bit, surprising to me were of that nature. But I heard other stories also. I mean, there was one guy, a really nice guy. I played soccer with him. He said, he's during COVID, he started, selling drugs. He knows it was the wrong thing to do, but he told me, he said, I wish the undercover cop who was buying drugs from him had arrested me early on. Instead, the cop waited until he had sold a certain amount of drugs so that he could, when he was arrested, now he could spend several years in jail. Whereas had he been arrested much earlier on, he would have only spent maybe a few months in jail or even just gotten probation. So the undercover FBI agent waited until he had sold a sufficient amount so they could be. I don't know. Is that really fair? It just seems to, one of the books I read in prison was From Jailer to Jailed, Bernie Carrick.
Oh, I read that book. I've interviewed Bernie for hours about that book. It's a wonderful book.
Yeah, it's a great book. And he said, some of these prosecutors are so overzealous, and they take these vague federal laws and they come after you with a ton of bricks. He said you couldn't do that in New York City because if prosecutors are not ethical, they themselves could be prosecuted. Federal prosecutors can never be prosecuted. Yeah, no,
it really is a wonderful book, whatever people think about Bernie Carrick. What is your view on the treatment of nonviolent offenders in the prison system? Are they being overpunished or misclassified?
I don't know. I don't even know if I have a strong opinion on the topic one way or the other. I don't know. I mean, look, I'm a conservative. I do believe we need to have a functioning society, and and people who are committing crimes should be punished. But I mean, I'll tell you about a book that I read, which maybe is very controversial to people, but it was written by a professor at John Jay College. It's called In Defense of Flogging. It's written by a person named Peter Moskus. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his last name correctly. And he argues that we really should bring back either flogging or caning, which is what they do in Singapore. And he says, look, yes, you might say it's sort of barbaric or inhumane. And he agrees it is kind of, it is somewhat barbaric and inhumane. He says, but you know what's even more barbaric and inhumane is locking people up for 5 or 10 years, and you're stealing years away from their life because you can't be a contributing, productive member of society when you're locked up. And you're punishing the person, you're punishing his family. I mean, I'm not married, unfortunately. Frank, if you know any nice, kind-hearted Jewish girls, please do share after the show. But so I didn't feel guilty, but there are people that feel very guilty. They can't be proper fathers or husbands when they're locked up. And so you're punishing the family, you're punishing them, you're stealing years away from them, you're stealing years away from society. If someone like Bernie Carrick, he was doing a tremendous amount of good on the outside, and all of a sudden he's now in prison for three years, just wasting away. So, I mean, so flogging, I mean, Peter Moskus argues you're going to be in excruciating pain, and you won't be able to walk or sit down probably for a month, but then you could go back to your life.
I think I want to interview him if that's the case. I was unfamiliar with that, but I think it's a fascinating argument. I'd love to. I don't see us changing to that anytime soon, but you never know. Year 3 or 4 of a Trump presidency, you never know. I will reach out to him. By the way, are you familiar with Debbie Schlussel? She's single and Jewish. Maybe I could put the two of you together.
Thank you. I think she's. I God forbid want to criticize or say something which people might misinterpret, but I think she's slightly older than I am.
All right. Well, hey, I think she's a lot. She seems a lot younger than her age, at least looks wise, from what I recall. But anyway, we'll save the matchmaking for after the show. Last question.
She does a lot of good, though.
Some critics argue that the U.S. prison system disproportionately targets certain groups or communities. Did you observe evidence of that during your time in prison?
I did not. Although I'm not really sure how you would judge these things. And one of the arguments I like on this topic is, if yes, you will see certain groups overrepresented, but then again, 9 out of every 10 people in prison for violent crimes are male. So are you going to suggest that judges hate men and they love women? No, the reason that there are 9 times more men than women in prison for murder is because there are 9 more time male murderers than female murderers. So it's not a good thing or a bad thing. Well, it's not. But for whatever reason, certain groups commit certain types of crimes more often than other groups. It's not. I'm not happy about it, but just it's a fact of life. So you can't just look at outcomes and say, oh, if there's a certain disproportionate outcome, that must mean that the people in charge of the system hate the people of that group. Not necessarily.
Well, Elliot, I have to tell you, I hope you get pardoned again after a prison sentence, because this has been one of my favorite appearances that you've ever had on this show. Really interesting, really comprehensive, and I'm glad you're out of prison, and I'm glad you're no longer have to listen in prison. You can listen at your leisure.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Elliot Resnick, you could check out his book, Movers and Shakers, Volume 3. I believe it's available on Amazon and wherever books are sold. You can also check out the Elliot Resnick Show podcast. I really do think that was my favorite appearance that he's ever had. That was great. If you are interested in dating Elliot, you can email me and I will connect you. I will pass on your information to Elliot. You can email me, frank.moreno@redappleaudionetworks.com. You must be Jewish. That is the one criteria. And female. And single. So I guess those are the 3. And apparently younger than W. Schlussel. So those are the 4 criteria. So if you check those 4 boxes, email me and I'll pass your resume over to Elliot. All right. 646-720-0635. That's 646-720-0635. This is The Other Side of Midnight. Straight ahead.